Some rooms don't go loud when something breaks. They go still. The kind of stillness that makes a pen feel too heavy, a breath feel too noticeable. That was the feeling in the conference room at Whitfield and Associates, right after a line got crossed in front of everyone. Erin Halvorsen runs a small logistics company outside Indianapolis. She's used to late payments, hard calls, and men who assume they can pressure her into a discount. What happened to her in this room mattered for a different reason. It wasn't business. It was the old, familiar message she'd been carrying since childhood, delivered with an open hand. And then, her voice took over. My cheek burned like someone had pressed a space heater against my skin. I kept my jaw tight, not because I was fine, but because I refused to give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Across the table, my father's fingers were still flexing, like the slap had been a decision he stood by. Don't start acting dramatic. Douglas Halvorsen muttered, eyes hard, mouth pulled tight. You embarrassed me. My brother Mark sat back in his chair with that lazy confidence he always wore around family, like consequences were for other people. He glanced at my face, then looked away, fast, pretending he hadn't seen anything. The attorney, James Whitfield, didn't rush. He didn't shout. He closed the leather binder in front of him with a careful, quiet finality. The sound landed heavier than the slap. Douglas leaned forward. We're done here. She's not signing anything today because she wants attention. We'll handle it at home. Whitfield's gaze stayed on my father, steady as a locked door. Mr. Halvorsen, sit back. Douglas let out a short laugh, sharp and offended. You don't tell me what to do. Whitfield didn't blink. He slid his glasses off and set them on the table like time had slowed down on purpose. My aunt's hand hovered near her mouth. My mother's shoulders were pulled up high, like she was trying to make herself smaller. Someone on the far end of the table shifted, then froze again. Whitfield spoke again, same volume, different weight. Do you know who actually owns the Glencoe property you've been living in? The air changed, not in a dramatic way, in a physics way, like the room lost oxygen. Douglas's mouth opened, then closed. That house is mine. I've lived there my whole life. Mark's leg stopped bouncing. His expression slipped for half a second, like his brain had missed a step. Whitfield tapped the binder once. Your father left specific instructions. We are not finished. Douglas's voice came out louder, rough around the edges. My father was old. He got confused. He knew what he wanted. Whitfield's eyes moved, just briefly, to me. Then back to Douglas. He was clear. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight, dry. I kept my hands under the table because they were shaking. Douglas turned his head toward me, slow, like he was bringing a weapon into position. This is what you do. You show up. You play victim. You take what isn't yours. I held his stare. You shouldn't have hit me. Mark exhaled like he was annoyed by the inconvenience of my pain. Can we not do this right now? I looked at him. You mean, like every other time? We noticed the part nobody commented on out loud, the way Erin didn't ask for permission to stand her ground, even with the whole family watching. Whitfield opened the binder again. Paper slid against paper. That soft sound felt like a warning. Douglas's voice dropped, dangerous and controlled. If you think you're walking out of here with anything, you're mistaken. My cheek still burned, but something else was starting to wake up under it. Not rage, clarity. I leaned forward, just enough to make him adjust his posture. I'm not signing anything. Whitfield's pen hovered above the page. Then we proceed. If stories like this stay with you, following along helps keep them from disappearing into silence. Douglas stared at the binder like it had betrayed him. Mark stared at me like I'd suddenly become a problem he couldn't outsource. Whitfield turned the page, and that was when I realized my grandfather hadn't invited us here for comfort. He'd brought us here for the truth. The morning had started with my hands on the steering wheel and a coffee I forgot to drink. The lid was still warm when I pulled into the parking lot outside Whitfield and Associates. I remember noticing that detail because my brain kept clinging to small, ordinary things, like they could anchor me. Inside, the receptionist glanced up, then softened. "They're already here," she said quietly, sliding a clipboard toward me. I nodded and signed my name. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. When I opened the conference room door, the conversation dipped for half a second. Not silence, just a pause. The kind people don't realize they do when they've already decided where you belong. My father sat at the head of the table, jacket still on, arms spread wide like the space answered to him. Mark lounged 2 seats down, scrolling on his phone, one leg crossed over the other. He didn't look up until I pulled out the chair at the far end. "You drove all night for this," Mark said, smirking. "Could have saved the gas. Dad already knows how this goes." Douglas didn't turn his head. "Sit down, Erin. Let's get this done." I sat. The chair felt colder than the rest. I folded my hands together, fingers laced tight, the way I do before a difficult call with a client who thinks volume equals leverage. James Whitfield cleared his throat. "Before we begin," Douglas waved him off. "No need to drag it out. We all know what my father wanted. Keep things in the family." Mark leaned back farther. "And keep things simple." I looked at my brother. "Simple for who?" He shrugged. "For everyone." My mother sat between them, eyes on the table, smoothing the edge of a napkin that didn't need smoothing. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Whitfield adjusted the binder in front of him. "Mr. Halvorsen. The estate includes multiple assets. Each one has specific instructions." Douglas exhaled through his nose, "which is why Erin will sign her portion to Mark and we'll move on." I felt something tighten behind my ribs. Not panic. Something older. "I haven't agreed to that," I said. The room shifted, chairs creaked. Mark finally looked at me fully, eyebrows raised. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "You don't even live here." "I live where my work is," I replied. "That doesn't make me temporary." Douglas turned then, slow, deliberate. "This isn't about your little company. This is family business." My jaw clenched. My name is on the invitation. We noticed how easily the room leaned toward him, how quickly the pressure collected around her words. Whitfield opened the binder. Paper slid free. "Let's proceed." The pen on the table gleamed under the lights. I watched it for a moment, then looked back at my father. Whatever he expected from me, silence wasn't it. Whitfield began reading in a steady voice. The kind that doesn't rush even when everyone else wants it to. Legal language. Careful pauses. My grandfather's name sounded different in that room. Heavier. Like it carried weight people had been ignoring on purpose. Douglas leaned back, arms crossed. Skip the sentimental parts. Whitfield didn't look up. Those aren't optional. Mark's chair tipped onto 2 legs. This is taking forever. I watched my mother's hands twist the napkin tighter. She still hadn't looked at me. Whitfield turned a page. The downtown condominium, located on Wabash Douglas, cut in. "That's the one Erin's signing over." The words landed flat, like a decision already made without me. Whitfield paused, pen resting on the paper. "The penthouse is valued at $3.9 million. The beneficiary Douglas pointed across the table, not even bothering to say my name. "That's not staying with her." Something in my chest tightened. Not fear. Frustration. The kind that builds when you're talked about like furniture. "I'm not signing anything," I said. Mark laughed once, short and sharp. "Don't be dramatic." Douglas pushed his chair back. "You don't need that place. You don't live here. You don't need assets weighing you down." "I run a company," I said. "I understand assets." His jaw flexed. "This is exactly the problem. You think you're smarter than everyone else?" The room went quiet again. Whitfield's eyes flicked up, then back to the page. Douglas stood. The movement was sudden enough that my shoulders tensed before my brain caught up. "Sit down," Whitfield said calmly. Douglas ignored him. The slap came fast. Loud. My head snapped to the side before I could stop it. Heat spread across my cheek, sharp and immediate. For a second, the only sound was my aunt's breath catching on the other end of the table. Douglas's voice was low, controlled. "You don't talk to me like that." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth and waited for the ringing in my ears to fade. We noticed how the room didn't erupt, how no one rushed in, how shock can feel like permission. Whitfield stood, not abruptly, just enough to change the balance. "Mr. Halvorsen, sit down. Now." Douglas stared at him, chest rising and falling. Mark shifted, suddenly very interested in the pattern on the carpet. I straightened slowly. My cheek throbbed, but my voice came out steady. "You shouldn't have done that." Douglas scoffed. "You pushed me." Whitfield stepped fully into the space between us. "This meeting will continue professionally, or it will end." Douglas dropped back into his chair, anger still crackling under his skin. Whitfield turned a page. As I was saying, the paper made a soft sound as it moved. Ordinary. Almost gentle. My hands shook under the table. I curled my fingers into my palm and breathed through it. Whatever my father thought this meeting was, it wasn't that anymore. Whitfield looked up again, eyes moving from Douglas to Mark, then briefly to me. "We're not finished." Whitfield asked everyone to step outside except me. He said it gently, like it wasn't a command, but nobody argued. Chairs scraped. My father's footsteps were heavy. Mark muttered something under his breath. My mother paused at the door, turned halfway like she might say something, then didn't. The door clicked shut. The room felt smaller without them, quieter. I noticed my hands again. One fingernail had pressed a half moon into my palm. Whitfield sat back down and loosened his tie. "Are you all right?" "I've had worse days," I said. It wasn't bravado, just fact. He nodded once, accepting that answer the way people do when they know pushing won't help. Then he opened the binder again, this time to a section marked with a red tab. "Your grandfather planned carefully," he said, long before anyone here expected him to. I leaned forward a little. "Planned what?" "The Glencoe property," Whitfield said. "The deed was transferred into an irrevocable trust 11 years ago." The words landed slowly. I blinked. 11. "Yes." He slid a document toward me. Thick paper. Official stamps. "You're the sole beneficiary." My mouth went dry. That doesn't make sense. I was barely out of college. Whitfield folded his hands. "Your grandfather was very clear about his reasons." He turned another page and read aloud, his voice steady. "He wrote that you were the only one who visited without asking for anything. The only one who called after your grandmother passed. The only one who didn't treat him like a resource." I stared at the paper. The ink looked slightly faded in places, like it had been handled often. "He trusted you," Whitfield continued. "He didn't trust what would happen if anyone else had control." I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief. Something heavier. Recognition. We noticed how she didn't smile when she learned, how the room stayed quiet. "There's more," Whitfield said, easing another folder toward me. "Several rental properties in Evanston and Skokie. They net a little over $22,000 a month. Modest stock accounts. Nothing flashy." My throat tightened. Why didn't he tell me? Whitfield didn't answer right away. He tapped the binder once. Thoughtful, because he wanted you to live your life without pressure, without being managed. I nodded slowly. That sounded like him. Quiet support, no speeches. "And your father?" I said. The words felt fragile. Did he know? Whitfield met my eyes. He suspected. Enough to be careful. Enough to be angry. I leaned back in the chair. The cushion exhaled softly under my weight. Whitfield closed the binder. This isn't a gift that can be taken back. I looked down at my hands, then back up. Then we should keep going. He picked up his pen. All right. The door stayed closed. The truth sat between us, solid and patient, waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. I drove straight to Glencoe after leaving the law office. Traffic hugged the lake, slow and polite, like nothing bad ever happened in houses with trimmed hedges. I parked in the same spot I used to when I lived here, instinct pulling me toward the curb even though the driveway was empty. The front door stuck the way it always had. I pushed harder than I meant to, and it gave with a small groan. "Hello," I called out. Habit more than hope. No answer. The house smelled off. Not dirty, just stale, like cologne sprayed to cover something older. I set my keys on the entry table and noticed a stack of envelopes pushed to the side. Thick ones, bank logos, red print along the edges. I picked one up and turned it over. Second notice. I opened another. Past due. Property tax statements. 3 years behind. The numbers blurred for a second before my brain caught up. In the living room, a box sat half open. Inside were folders, some labeled, some not. I flipped through one and felt my stomach drop. Personal guarantees, extension agreements, an old line of credit tied to a limited liability company with Mark's name scrawled beside my father's. Unbelievable, I muttered, though nothing about it surprised me. A sound came from upstairs, a thud, then another. I followed it down the hall to the den, the room that used to be my grandfather's study. The desk was covered in papers. An open laptop glowed faintly. On the screen was a draft document. Property transfer agreement. My brother's name typed neatly at the top. We noticed the pause here, the way she stood still instead of reacting, the quiet before the next choice. I closed the laptop, gently, like it might bite if I moved too fast. Footsteps sounded on the front steps, heavy, familiar. The door swung open and my father walked in, jacket still on, face tight. He stopped short when he saw me. "What did Whitfield tell you?" he demanded. "Enough." His jaw set. "Then you know this house is in trouble. I know you put it there." He scoffed. "Everything I did was for this family. For Mark," I said, turning to face him fully. "For the version of this family that never included me." He took a step closer. "You don't understand how things work. I run a company," I replied. "I understand debt." Mark came in behind him, breathless, eyes darting around the room. "So are you fixing this or not?" I looked at my brother. "Fixing what?" "The bank," he snapped. "Dad said you could refinance." "No," I said. My father's voice dropped. "You owe us." I shook my head. "I don't." The words landed between us. Solid. Not loud. Not dramatic. Outside, a car passed, tires whispering over pavement. Inside, the house held its breath. I walked past them and picked up one of the envelopes again, folding it once before setting it back down. My hands were steady now. Whatever this place had been to me growing up, it wasn't that anymore. The email came in while we were still standing in the den, the three of us locked in that quiet standoff. My phone buzzed once in my hand. I almost ignored it. Almost. The subject line was short. Default review pending. I opened it and felt the room tilt just slightly, the way it does when bad news arrives before you're ready to sit down. "Read it," Mark said, eyes already narrowing. "What is it?" I took a breath and read out loud, slower than I felt. "The bank has initiated a default review on the Glencoe property. 48 hours to respond." My father's face drained of color. He reached for the back of a chair like he needed something solid to hold on to. "They can't do that," he said. "I've been paying." "Not enough," I replied. "And not honestly." Mark laughed once, sharp and high. "This is on you," he snapped at me. You walked in here and stirred everything up. I looked at him. The bank didn't email me because of a conversation. Douglas turned toward me, voice lowering. You can fix this. You have assets. You can refinance. Buy us time. Us? I repeated. Yes, he said quickly. The family. I shook my head. You want me to absorb the debt. He stepped closer. That's what families do. I felt the pressure then, thick and familiar. The expectation that I would bend, smooth things over, carry the weight quietly so no one else had to feel it. We noticed how fast the room closed in on her, how quickly urgency turned into entitlement. Mark paced, hands in his hair. If the bank digs into this, my credit is done. Everything I've worked on goes under. You didn't work on it, I said. The words came out calmer than I expected. You signed for it. Douglas slammed his hand on the desk. Enough. You're not throwing us to the wolves. I'm not throwing anyone. I replied, I'm stepping back. He stared at me, incredulous. You think standing there doing nothing makes you righteous. I'm not doing nothing, I said. I'm refusing to lie. Silence stretched. The hum of the old lamp filled the space between us. My phone buzzed again. Another email. Attachment included. I didn't open it. Mark stopped pacing. You really won't help. I met his eyes. I won't refinance a house I didn't put into danger. Douglas's voice cracked. Just slightly. You'd let them take it. They might, I said. Or they might restructure without me. Either way, it won't be on my signature. He sagged into the chair, suddenly smaller than I remembered. You don't understand what this house is. I do, I said quietly. It's a place you thought made you untouchable. Another buzz. This one a missed call. Unknown number. Mark looked at the phone like it was an accusation. They're calling already. I slid my phone into my pocket. I'm not answering for you. Douglas covered his face with his hands, elbows on the desk. When he spoke again, his voice was muffled. You're really doing this? Yes, I said, because pretending this isn't real would be worse. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows. Inside, the clock on the wall ticked louder than it had all afternoon. No one moved to stop me when I turned toward the door. My steps sounded steady on the hardwood, each one a small decision already made. Behind me, Mark muttered something I didn't catch. My father didn't speak at all. The 48 hours had started ticking, and for the first time, it wasn't my job to save them. I came back the next morning. Not because I wanted to, because unfinished things have a way of sitting on your chest until you deal with them. The house was quieter than the night before. No television, no pacing, just the sound of the coffee machine running too long in the kitchen. My father sat at the table, staring at his phone like it might change its mind. Mark leaned against the counter, arms folded, jaw tight. You should talk to the bank, Mark said as soon as he saw me. They're not listening to Dad. I set my bag down by the door. They're not supposed to. Douglas looked up then. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't slept. They froze one of the accounts. I nodded. That was coming. His mouth tightened. This didn't have to happen. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. It already did. Mark scoffed. You walk in here like you're the judge. I'm the owner, I said. The word felt strange and solid at the same time, and that means I get a say now. Silence stretched. My mother stood near the sink, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't lifted. Douglas rubbed his forehead. What do you want? I took a breath. First, you stop taking out loans against this house. No exceptions. Mark laughed under his breath. You can't be serious. I turned to him. You're moving out by the end of the month. His head snapped up. You're kicking me out. I'm ending the arrangement, I said. You're an adult. You'll figure it out. We noticed how the room shifted when she said it. Not louder, heavier. Douglas's voice dropped. And me. You can stay, I said. but not like before. There will be rent. There will be oversight. Everything goes through the trust. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. You want me to answer to you. I want the house protected. I replied, if that feels personal, that's not on me. Mark pushed off the counter. You think you earned this. I met his eyes. I think Grandpa trusted me. Douglas flinched at that. He looked down at his hands, then back up. Slower this time. You're really doing this. Yes, I said, because someone has to. My mother finally spoke. Erin, she started, then stopped. Her voice wavered. Just be careful. I nodded once. I am. Mark grabbed his keys and headed for the door, muttering under his breath. The screen slammed behind him. Douglas stayed seated. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him inch by inch. I never thought it would be you. I stood, pushing the chair back gently. Neither did I. The clock on the wall ticked through the silence. No one rushed to fill it. I picked up my bag and moved toward the door. My father didn't stop me. He didn't follow. The line was there now, clear, quiet, and for the first time, I wasn't stepping back over it. Things didn't explode after that. They thinned out. Mark came back once, 2 days later, long enough to grab clothes and a box of things he said mattered. He didn't look at me while he packed. You didn't have to do it this way, he muttered, shoving a drawer closed. I stood in the doorway. I didn't do it to you. He snorted. Sure feels like it. His phone buzzed while he was tying the box shut. He glanced at the screen, then again, like it might change if he waited. His face went pale. They cut my card, he said quietly. The business account too. I nodded. That happens. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a second, he looked younger, not angry, just caught. We noticed how consequences rarely announce themselves. They arrive through small interruptions. My father stayed mostly in the den. Papers spread out, reorganized, stacked again. He started asking before making calls. That was new. One afternoon he cleared his throat while I was reviewing statements at the kitchen table. The board asked me to step down. I didn't look up right away. Effective when, immediately, he rubbed his hands together. Slow. They said it was better for everyone. I slid a folder toward him. These are the trust terms. Read them. He did. Carefully. No arguments this time. At the end, he leaned back. Your grandfather always did think ahead. Yes, I said. He did. Mark texted once more that week. A single line. I found a place. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because there wasn't anything left to negotiate. That night, the house sounded different. Less movement. Fewer doors. The refrigerator hummed. A pipe clicked. I stood at the window in the living room, looking out at the dark lawn. Lights on in some houses, off in others. My phone stayed quiet on the table behind me. For the first time since I walked back into this place, nothing was being demanded of me. Thanksgiving was smaller than it used to be. No extra leaves in the table, no speeches. Just the three of us and food that didn't try to impress anyone. My father carved the turkeys slower than he once did, hands steadier than I expected. My mother passed dishes without filling the silence. We didn't talk about the bank or the trust or what had shifted, not because it was forbidden, because it didn't need air anymore. After dinner, I stepped out onto the back porch. The lake was dark, flat, holding the cold. I pulled my coat tighter and let myself breathe without counting. Behind me, the screen door creaked. My father stood there, hands in his pockets. You didn't have to stay, he said. I wanted to. I answered. He nodded once. Your grandfather would have liked this. I know. He hesitated, then added, I'm still figuring things out. So am I. That was it. No apology wrapped in explanation. No last grab at authority. just a statement that didn't ask me to fix it. He went back inside. I stayed where I was. For a long time, this house felt like a test I kept failing, no matter how steady my work was, no matter how carefully I built my life elsewhere. Walking through these rooms always made me smaller. Now it didn't. I realized something standing there in the cold. Erin Halvorsen wasn't chosen because she was patient or agreeable or easy to manage. She was chosen because she showed up without asking what it would cost her later. That changed how I see myself. Not as the daughter who survived this family, but as the woman who stepped out of its gravity and kept moving. Inside, laughter rose briefly, not loud, just enough to register. I went back in and turned off the lights one by one. If this story stays with you, following along keeps it from ending here. We stayed quiet at the end, noticing how the noise didn't return and how that, more than anything, felt like the real resolution.